Welcome to the BigTime Strength Podcast, featuring small school strength coaches producing big-time results. On behalf of myself, Coach Gage Rozier, and co-host Coach Preston Peterson, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's show. Before we get to today's episode, I'd like to recognize our amazing sponsors who allow us to bring this podcast to you for free. Our first sponsor is TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is the leading software for high schools and colleges by providing coaches the ability to write programs online, generate over 13 reports, and even train athletes remotely for side income. Right now, if you sign up with code BigTime, you will receive a free APRE programming template, which works automatically within TeamBuildr. No more spreadsheets and workout cards to track training maxes that change day by day. Automate your programming without outsourcing your programming with TeamBuildr. Thank you to Hewitt and staff at TeamBuildr for their continued support. They do an amazing job. Our second sponsor is Optimum Nutrition Athletics. Athletes train hard to play at the highest level, and all that hard work raises the bar on muscle recovery. Optimum Nutrition's athletics program has industry-leading products that can help. Protein is key to muscle recovery, and Gold Standard 100% Whey, the world's best-selling whey protein powder, provides 24 grams of protein that mixes easily just using a spoon and a glass. Gold Standard 100% Whey is made in Optimum Nutrition's state-of-the-art facilities in Aurora, Illinois, and is banned substance tested by Informed Choice. Through Optimum Nutrition's athletic program, you can also get Pro Gainer for big athletes looking to become even bigger, and ready-to-eat protein snacks including Protein Crisp bars, cake bites, wafers, and almonds. After dominating the sports nutrition industry for over 30 years, newly created Optimum Nutrition Athletics brings that same trust and quality that knows how to put convenient options for protein in the hands of athletes who desire to become bigger, stronger, and better at their sport. If you'd like more information and free samples, email Derek Walters, Director of Optimum Nutrition Athletics, whose email and contact information you can find in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much to our amazing sponsors for their continued support. Now, let's get to today's episode.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the BigTime Strength Podcast with Coach John Garrish this week. Coach Garrish has brought a lot of experience from multiple sports, and I'm excited to pick his brain on no doubt strength training, but also speed development with that. And he's a head track coach, he's head strength and conditioning coach. It might be athletic performance is actual title. And what I really want to do is dig into how he's making athletes the best that they can be, not only in the weight room, but truly building that speed, what that actually looks like to carry over to all the sports, soccer, basketball, football, whatever it is. So excited to have Coach on. Coach, welcome to the show. Can you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure, Preston. Thanks for having me, man. I'm in my fifth year. Actually, I just wrapped up year 5, so I'm going into year 6 as the Director of Athletic Development at North Broward Prep. We're in Coconut Creek, Florida. That's South Florida. Broward County, for some people that might not be familiar with the state, it's the Atlantic coast. We're in the same county as Fort Lauderdale, which is about 30 minutes north of Miami. So we're down south. Private school, pre-K through 12. We won't be post-grad prep school, but many of our students that we see for the most part are in high school. This year, kind of a not change of the guard, but kind of a change of scope. We've integrated and implemented a lot more with our middle school. So this year was the first year that I added a middle school class. We'll add an additional one next year. Anyway, we might talk about that a little bit later on. My track, I played football most of my life. Ended up picking up track when I had one too many concussions in college, and eventually graduated from the University of North Texas with a few other stops. And that was where I started with my post-grad graduate internship, kind of transitioning into my strength and conditioning career under Frank Wintrick and others, of course, our entire staff at North Texas. Shortly after there, right after I graduated with my master's, I went into a similar role, a graduate internship type role with Rutgers University. I was only there for a short time. Before I got a call to come down home, really to come back home, which is, I'm from South Florida originally. I did not go to North Broward Prep, unfortunately. But this North Broward was honestly the closest school to the house I grew up in, which is pretty cool that it could have happened. I could have gotten a call from a school in Arizona. Nothing wrong with the state of Arizona, of course, but for it to have happened back home and to get a really good call and a really good opportunity, that I was probably hesitant about at first. But quickly in speaking with the decision makers of the school and meeting some of the students, after interviewing, I knew this was exactly where I wanted to be. And it just took a couple months for me to know that I wanted to be here for a long time. So, fast forward, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily here for a long time yet, but 5 years has been the best 5 years of my life. I plan on many more being in North Broward. As I said, just wrapped up year 5. I just wrapped up year 3 as the school's head track and field coach. That was something that we added on. So some of the things that we talk about, you might hear kind of the tone that I speak in or the lens that I see through is going to be oftentimes track driven or track minded. And maybe that wasn't always, even if I was a hammer thrower in college. So I wasn't necessarily a sprinter per se, but I'd always kind of had this, I guess, general knowledge of some of the experts, some of the just geniuses of track and field for many, many decades, that coaches have been putting out really good information from a track and field background. When we had our head track and field coach had retired a few years ago, originally we said that I wasn't going to coach any sports. I was just going to focus primarily and completely on the strength and conditioning of our students. We decided that, speaking when I say we, I'm talking about my athletic director and I, that it would be a really good opportunity to get a bunch of our kids involved in a program that track in itself, to me, is I consider it a method of training, but even the sport is so committed to training, and it is so dependent on training. The performance is completely dependent on the time that you put in and the appropriate volume of training, that it not only did it go hand in hand with what we were trying to accomplish, we thought that just the time of year, being that our largest sports weren't competing at that time, trying to find ways to get kids into the weight room in a completely voluntary environment, but also get kids out to the track. So when we decided a few years ago that I would be the person that takes over our track program, now all of a sudden a bunch of the kids that were training with me in the off season are coming out to the track, and a bunch of the kids maybe that were on the track team previously that maybe weren't spending so much time in the weight room, especially in season. Now we're spending quite a bit in the weight room. So anyway, short story long, that's kind of where we're at now. That's where I've been. And that's kind of the range of experience, I guess, that goes into our day-to-day in training and programming for kids.
That's awesome stuff, Coach. Most of the time when I think about coaching track and being around athletes in a way that, I mean, track is truly athletic performance, right? It's how can we perform at our best when we need to perform at our best. And it's a really good microcosm of what it looks like in the weight room too. When you tell people that you're the strength coach and the track coach, what are some of the responses that you get, and maybe what's your philosophy when it comes to programming weight room in season with track, right? And some people, like when you hear a track coach in season, they're like, oh man, we stay away from the weight room. Sounds like right. You guys are lifting during season. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. And it depends on who I'm talking to. You said just kind of what somebody might respond with if I tell them I'm a head track and strength coach. I think first and foremost, I think I'm kind of hesitating to put this in a way, but I think in previous experiences, potentially even in my own career, but certainly in others, and I think a lot of the stories that you often hear are, for one reason or another, and this is like me coming from a completely unbiased perspective, coming from a background of both. Oftentimes, strength coaches and track coaches, that's one of the relationships on campus that are the most, I don't want to say shaky, because I think both people are coming from such a good position, maybe just so confused or misconstrued. I think oftentimes track coaches and strength coaches aren't on the same page, and it's not that they're not on the same page. Both obviously want what's best for their kids and for their student athletes. But in many ways, I think the lines are very difficult to draw in a sport that, like I said, is training. You know what I mean? Like, I think volume is, the sport is so dependent on the sensitivity, the sensitivity to volume in the sport is so specific and so particular that anything that we do in the weight room, I mean, think about it. Like a lot of times as strength and conditioning coaches, athletic development coaches, performance coaches, whatever you want to call us, what we might use out in our day-to-day activities, sprints, jumps, throws, those are three different events, three different specific qualities that are so particular to sport. You know what I'm saying? So when we're talking about throwers, a thrower might go out and put up a bunch of shot put throws, and then to come into the weight room and do a bunch of med ball throws is probably going to be something that might not be beneficial towards a student. So anyway, having the opportunity to basically control the volume of everything that's going on, I think is great, especially at the high school level. And I think it's also almost a model that many coaches might want to take on. And I know there have been various ideas at various places of coaches kind of hired on by the track staff, and sometimes that can be a challenging work scenario and environment as well. But so it's like I couldn't be in a better position, I feel like, especially for a person that wants to succeed as the track coach, but also continue to develop our strength and conditioning program. I don't think there's a better position to be in because of just the number of kids that we get to see on a daily basis, the high performance that we get to achieve and seek to attain. That is incredible. It's a really, really good spot to be. So some strength coaches might say, how do you have the time for that? Or how do you do that time of year? Or how do you make sure that you get your lifts in? Some of the track coaches say, well, wait a second, you're not lifting them in season, are you? Some other questions like that. Just depends on who I'm talking to, kind of what maybe response I'll get. As far as training in season, we have, I think last year our track team had somewhere around 160 to 170 on our roster by the time all was said and done. That doesn't mean all are committed to a 5-day-a-week, like completely embedded in the program. That's not necessarily what that means for them. But we had those numbers on our team roster. So we have a bunch of kids. I would say 90 to 95% of those kids are multi-sport kids. So really, when you flip it and kind of look at it based on who our kids are, like, a majority of those kids are kids that previously or otherwise wouldn't have a spring sport, if that makes sense. So what those kids would be doing otherwise is coming to the weight room with me and doing whatever else we're doing from the athletic development standpoint. So when you think of it that way, so I think we're going to talk about some of Tony Holler's methods. When you're like, he's kind of shown me a bunch of things and taught me a bunch of things, but one of the biggest conversation pieces, I think a big thing in our field right now, speaking from strength and conditioning, which I think is great and it's very important, the importance of not just sprinting, not just short burst sprinting, but max velocity, top speed, upright sprinting in a linear fashion. I think is extremely important, and I think that's kind of a quality that's been getting the spotlight in our field lately, which I think is great. I think another conversation that has come about is kind of the need or the necessity of lifting for sprinters. I don't know that I have the answer necessarily for that or any of the answers for that. The one thing I will say though is, regardless, and we're not going to go out there at track meets and try to like not succeed. That's the last of our wants or our what we're seeking to achieve. We want to perform really well at the track meets, but at the end of the day, probably 90% of those students, if I ask them what their favorite sport is or what their first sport, what their primary sport is, if they want to compete in college, what sport do they want to compete in? It's a sport other than track. And that's not at all to knock the sport. I love the sport. I think it's the best sport going. I think it's the best way to train our kids and help them prepare for other sports. But many of them are going to say, I really want to play soccer in college. I really want to play football in college. I really want to play basketball in college. So with that said, And regardless, even if that's not their aspiration, that's completely fine. But we want to prepare them for that, and we want to, especially if a sport's a contact sport, of course they're going to have to be in the weight room. Our football guys are going to have to be in the weight room. Our sprinters, I do think there is value. I truly believe there is value in lifting in season. So that's going to be an important part. That goes the same. So I'll work specifically with our sprinters and horizontal jumpers. They're really the same group. And all of those kids are multi-sport kids, but they're going to be committed to the weight room throughout the season. You'll kind of give and take what you can, I think. If it was up to me, I mean, I don't mind doing a sort of potentiating lift the day of, or certainly the day before a meet. Like, I would be fine with that. But I know that our kids, even if they feel great and even if they go out and perform well, more often than not, I'm going to get some responses and some feedback of, heavy legs and what have you. And I want to put our kids in a position where they feel really comfortable about how they can compete and go out there and compete well. So sure, there's a certain, like I said, can we find 2 or 3 other days in the week that we're going to lift? I think we can. You know what I mean? So We'll make sure that either we come in and lift the day after a meet, or we'll lift early. We'll kind of front load it away from the meet. But we make sure that all of our kids are going to get, again, 2 to 3 lifts. Certainly we're going to shoot for 3. And I think every week of this track season we got 3. But, if it's a week that we're traveling, I'm not going to worry about getting in like a hotel gym or anything like that, if that makes sense. Like, it's not going to be something that if we're on the road, and we only have a couple of travel meets, but we're gonna do our best to get 3 lifts in. More often than not, we do. If not, we're going to get 2, and they're going to be high quality. They're not necessarily going to be high volume. They're going to be low volume, but we're going to train with intent, and we're going to train with focus.
That's awesome, Coach. Thanks for describing a decent amount of that. One of the things I want to ask you about is, no doubt in season, you're getting your speed work, you're getting the max velocity stuff. It sounds like you're lifting 2 to 3 times a week very consistently. What does it look like for all your athletes once you get to out of season, or maybe it's summer training, or what? And that's in regard to speed training, to max velocity training. What's that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So I tell our kids all the time, like, as soon as that state meet, we finish our state meet, and on the ride home, I take off my track hat and I put on my strength coach hat, because it's, for one, I think one of the things that we see from, I think our coaches on campus do a really good job. I think the coaches, you hear some horror stories of some travel coaches, some high school coaches too, but we haven't really had the issue at North Broward of like coaches that just never give kids a break. You know what I mean? I think that's another really good thing about having the opportunity to compete in track for us, is that, like, we get away from basketball, which we play, 12 months out of the year. Like, there's some time away from it that you get to go and hang out at a meet, rather than like be so, riled up and ready to play your next game, and the opponent is the enemy. And obviously, like, that's sport. We love sport, not necessarily that the opponent's enemy, but the opponent is an opponent. And track is different, being an individual sport, being a co-ed sport. Like, the social experience is very unique, and I think very important for kids, especially kids in other sports, to experience. Like, going to track meets and being around boys, being around girls, being around kids from all different walks of life, private school, public school, probably potentially 15, 20 schools there, distance runners, throwers, sprinters, basketball players, football players, soccer players. I think it's just really incredible from the standpoint of being able to get away. So I want to make sure that I do the same for them with track. Like, we'll compete, and we'll have 2 summer meets, and legitimately, I told you the numbers of the kids that we had in the spring. I tell them, hey, if you want to compete in this, I'm going to go there and cheer you on, but I'm not over coaching you. We're not treating this like it's summer track. If you want to compete, I'm going to sign you up. I think we had 8 kids the first meet, and like, that's not a loss to me. That's just whoever wants to compete in it can. Otherwise, we're training for whatever sport is next. So when we get, again, I put my strength coach hat on, and those guys that were out, or gals that were out on the track and are going to play soccer, for us, it's a winter sport. So we still have some time, but they're going to play soccer. Well, your next sport is soccer, and the sport that you love is soccer. So let's think of this summer as training for soccer. If track is the sport that you love, all right, well, treat it like it's track practice. It's not different. I mean, it's not much different. The way that we treat the summer, the way that we treat the spring, things are very, very similar. The difference is, again, it's just my mindset and my approach with the kids and not speaking a track language. We bring the distance in a little bit, meaning, yes, we're still going to be training in an idea of max velocity, and I'll break down kind of the days and weeks and how we split up our schedule, but we're not going to be doing the 120s, 150s, 200s, things of that. Like that's not, I'm not saying it's not important, but we're not spiking up in the summer. We'll go cleats on the field. Like everybody's going to be in cleats on the field. It doesn't matter what sport you play, if you're football, basketball. I mean, the field sports kind of are self-explanatory, but even our court sports are going to be in cleats, going to be on the turf. Knowing that, and another thing that track has done for me in particular is it gives me the opportunity, like we're not necessarily periodizing various points in the year because we want to do that. It almost naturally happens because of what time of year we're in, because of what sport's coming next, because of what academic period we're in, not meaning class period, meaning literally kind of what time of year and what it looks like. So I know that from February to May, I'm going to basically I'm certainly going to have 5 days a week to schedule it. Time to commit to linear sprinting, to max velocity sprinting. That will be our paramount number one, and I still think it must remain number one throughout the year, but that is everything for us in that time of year. So we're probably similar to the Tony Holler Feed the Cats method and just kind of his overall philosophy of really we're looking at like 2 to 3 sprint sessions, and meaning 2 potentially training sessions and a competition day would count in there. So you're looking at that potentially, and then those other 2 days that might be committed to event specific. So that's also a big difference in what you'll see during track season. Besides the point, we're talking right now on July 8th, 2019. We're in the summer. We are committing to, again, overall development for our student athletes, preparation for whatever their next sport is. So many of our next sports are multi-directional. So I know that we're not going to spend much time in a multi-directional lateral method of training in track season. Just because, I'm not saying it's going to be a waste of time in track season, but the vision and the mindset is geared more towards what's happening linearly. So in the summer, we have to kind of fill those gaps of the multi-directional and lateral concepts. So, however, I think we need to maintain a thread of max velocity sprinting and linear speed development throughout the year. I think in the summer, because most of those sports now, a lot of coaches will, and I don't mean saying a lot of coaches will say this, meaning that they're necessarily wrong, but this is kind of against my way of thinking that you're not necessarily going to reach a top speed. So it's not necessary to train it, and acceleration is more important. Now, you don't need to throw all of that away just because of the first part of the statement. I think the acceleration is more important. Talking piece and talking point, I think, is something to think about. Now, do I necessarily think acceleration is more important? No, but I think accelerating on a field and re-accelerating out of multi-directional movement and redirection is different than an acceleration out of the blocks or what you would see on the track. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I just wrapping my tongue around? But so with that said, in the summer, we're going to commit a lot more time to just short burst acceleration. And now that will be implemented not only in our linear day, but also in our lateral day, because I consider re-accelerations as a method of acceleration. Does that make sense? So we're going to go the way that we operate our system throughout the year, regardless of when it is, or, and things might change if we have a Thursday track meet and I want to lift Monday, Tuesday, Friday. We might do a lower upper Monday, Tuesday. But for the most part throughout the year, like we're operating under a modified tier system inspired program. Like that's kind of the way to look at it. We're not going strictly by the book necessarily, even though I believe the book was groundbreaking and has completely, like it lays the foundation and everything for our strength and conditioning program. There's still quite a few modifications that we've made to meet the North Broward Prep kid that is different from the North Broward Public High School kid, different from the Florida Atlantic University kid. Any situation that we're in, we're different. So it's going to be a different perspective. So we're going to lift in a format Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're going to rotate movements based on what the emphasis is going to be for the day, and that's going to rotate throughout the week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays are going to be on field for all of our kids. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I split up groups, multiple groups. Right now we have a ladies group kicks it off in the morning, kind of combo football, basketball group follows, and our football program is not like massive like many high schools that you might see. We have probably like 35 to 40 kids, and some of those are international, so our numbers are even lower in the summer. And we'll have some of the basketball guys in that group as well. After that will be kind of like a rotational boys group, which will be like baseball, soccer, hockey, lacrosse, any other sports that, again, I know that doesn't fit the basic definition of a rotational sport, but that's kind of my mindset and how I see them fitting in and kind of the type of kid that we have. I think that group meshes really well. And then I'll have a middle school group to finish off the day. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there'll be split groups in the weight room. On Tuesday and Thursday, we have a camp that comes on the campus, and they have the rights to the campus from really the entire summer. But they've been gracious to allow us to use the field space till 9 a.m. So I have to get all of the kids in and on and off the field by 9 a.m. So I bring everybody together, and we call it Student Body Speed School on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7:30 to 9. Now, understanding that I mentioned middle school, I've mentioned girls, I mentioned boys, like we have everybody. And I think it's the best thing going for our strength and conditioning program right now are those days. But also it does shape kind of the methods that you see out there and the movements that you see out there. So it's not going to be like massively intentionally technical, if that makes sense. Like, of course, what we're doing, there's a purpose that we're trying to learn something, kind of that same mindset of speed school, like thinking, okay, what can we take away from this from a learning perspective? But also filling holes and checking boxes of like the simplest way that we can train some particular quality. And more importantly, the most enjoyable way that we can train a particular quality, if that makes sense. So we will have a linear day and we will have a lateral multi-directional day. In that linear day, usually throughout the summer, again, we're thinking like short bursts. We're thinking, pure acceleration. But on some of those days, we kind of transition into slightly longer distances. Every one of those days, regardless, we're timing a 40. So that's kind of where the feed the cats is still coming into play on those days. And then on our multi-directional day, the way that we split it up is like a shuffle slash, I'm trying to think of how to explain it, but like kind of a more square method of change of direction or angles, if that makes sense. So more 90-degree cuts than, whatever other degree would be in like a zigzag slash curvilinear. So we'll have like shuffle concepts. We'll have sprint shuffle concepts. And then on the other day, and again, this will rotate weekly. So we're not going 2 multi-directional days in a week. This would be the next week would be like a zigzag curvilinear type where we're working some crossover run ideas. but we're also implementing there some max velocity qualities and more so like techniques, if that makes sense. So because like can you kind of understand what I'm saying with like a zigzag drill?
Yep.
Meaning like just like a curvilinear sprint, like cone to cone around the cones and going for whatever distance. That to me, I think I heard it, and he's in the TFC crew, at least two. He's certainly highly regarded in the crew. Rob Assisi is a jumps coach, and forgive me for being forgetful of what school he's at, but
I've read a lot of his articles. I really like a lot of his stuff. I agree. Great resource for that. Keep on going.
Absolutely. No, great resource. And like some of the things that he mentioned, and he kind of sees through the lens maybe of the jumps. And so sure, high jump is going to have a curvilinear approach. But in long and triple, that is a linear approach into the board. But he would mention, and I hope I'm not like twisting his words by any means, but he had mentioned like some of his hops, skips, his gallops, his bounds that he'll do in a fashion of curvilinear, or not necessarily straight up linear. That really taught his kids or helped his kids learn like some of the ideas just by kind of simply adding slight variety or variability that made them kind of solve and create a solution to a problem. So in my mind, kind of how we thought of it is in those zigzag type of drills where we're accomplishing pretty high velocities from a sprinting standpoint, and it's just slightly deviating off of a linear path. I look at that as a max velocity day, and I know we're not necessarily hitting 100% probably in terms of our top speed, but I still think the mechanics are pretty close. And I think maybe the closer our mechanics through those drills, probably the better off we'll be going through them. So, I think that just creating an environment that causes our students to create a solution has been something that's really beneficial to us, I think. And again, that's kind of a way that I can implement some of our lower level sprint drills and kind of make it make sense for the day, if that makes sense. So meaning some of our top speed, max velocity, our upright, kind of more emphasizing posture drills. And we've kind of implemented them on those days. So, so we could work in some of our top speed work on those linear days when we're emphasizing a little bit more acceleration, but I can lengthen the distance a little bit and open them up. Or we can just purely work it in those curvilinear days, which I think both have great benefit. And so far through the summer, our times have been going in the direction that we want them to. So it's proven valuable.
That's awesome stuff, Coach. I'm still trying to finish up some of the things that you're spitting out there for me. One of the things that's just sticking out to me anyway is, like you got 170 kids out for track, which in itself is amazing. And then, you're working with all these sports, doing all these different things and trying to manage all that time. There's no doubt to me that there's probably some sort of positive culture around your program. Doesn't mean, not just track, not just strength and conditioning, but just in general athletic performance at your school. Can you kind of describe what your culture looks like? Maybe something that you're trying to build within that culture?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so cliche. First and foremost, I want our kids, I want our families, I want our students' parents to know that I love them and I care about them, and I do my best every morning to keep in mind the reason that we're doing what we're doing, meaning you and I in the strength and conditioning profession and coaching kids and seeking to develop kids. So when you keep that mindset and you keep that approach, it's funny how a lot of things kind of fall into place. And I truly believe that. I think when we get wrapped up in for such positive, I think in a different point and place in time, maybe like winning soccer games will be the number one way that I can get soccer kids into the weight room. Maybe telling our lady volleyball players at some other school or in some other time or in some other location that the number one way that they can get a college volleyball scholarship is coming to the weight room. And maybe in that way, I'll get all of our volleyball girls in there. And sometimes I think when you identify kids, and I think the biggest thing in growing the program has been taking on a sales approach and taking on like almost a recruitment strategy on campus of how can we get these kids, because we are if anybody tries to correct this, I'll be quick to correct them. We are a completely voluntary environment. And I know that sounds like, and it does place its own set of hurdles in front of us, but we are at a school that is a highly successful, high-performing private school with families that have busted their butt to find the means to send their kids to our school, and they are our community that we're serving. So in that instance, if you tell a kid, we're certainly not telling kids, hey, if you don't come here, if you don't come to lift, you're not on the team anymore. Like, that's not something we'll ever do. So there will be some coaches that, of course, stress different expectations and responsibilities and kind of just standards of being a part of a program. But aside from that, like, all of our kids know they don't have to be there. And I think when you take on that approach and you take on versus saying like kids are different now, they don't want to come and train, taking it on yourself, meaning as the coach, and saying, how do I find a way to get these kids to buy into what we're doing and come into the room? Like, building a culture, I don't need to build a culture in the weight room. And I'm not saying I don't need to, like, as a profession, we don't need to. Different place, different school, depends on where you are. All of our kids walk into the room because for one reason or another, they want to be there. So when we find that reason and we're able to kind of take advantage of that reason, we don't need to build the culture in the weight room. There's not, like, if you come in the door and you don't want to be there, I don't know who's forcing you, but it's not the time and place to like get you bought in, if that makes sense, or find the way to like make you enjoy it. With that said, it's not just about getting the kids in the door. We have to get the kids back in the door the next day and the day after that and the day after that. So it all comes back to, are they enjoying what they're doing? Do they see value in what they're doing? Are they benefiting from the training that we're designing? Hopefully that makes sense. So although, you know, some of my track thoughts, I might be, hey, you might be on our 4x4 that went to states last year. And this year we're expecting to do even better. Maybe that's something that encourages a kid because, you know, their other sport isn't going to go and compete for a state championship and they want to do it. Or maybe it's, hey, this is really going to help you for soccer. Or is this something that you will want to be a part of? But when they know, you know, and track sometimes seems like it's a little bit more challenging because I'm the coach. Winning and losing is usually something that is important to the coach. Like when they see me as their strength and conditioning coach and I don't coach their sport and their sport coach isn't, and now this is also like, this could be a challenge in other places. Their sport coach isn't calling home and saying, hey, why isn't Sally at workouts this morning? They know that that's not going to come from anywhere, and they know that it's their decision to be there. I tend to try my best to over-communicate with parents, with kids, to let them know how valued they are. And I assure you, if I am sitting on a high horse, standing on a pedestal, I hope it'll be me just challenging myself to do a better job of it tomorrow. Like that's the number one thing I want to do for our kids is make sure that they feel like they're wanted in the weight room. And again, if you can get them in the weight room is not an easy place. It doesn't matter what training method you're doing. It's not an easy place to be a high school girl, to wake up at 6:15 in the morning and drive 45 minutes and be on time for a summer workout at 7:30. Like that, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're coming to do that, you have mental toughness. You are strong-willed. You are an impressive young human being that I'm excited to coach. So once they get in, the challenges are there. It's not the most like bars, racks are not the most welcoming environment, and they're going to see training methods that are new to them and challenging them. As the coach, I want to give them their share of challenging them, but also knowing that I'm their biggest fan. So that they have support when they're in an environment that is challenging and maybe not the most comfortable situation or comfortable transition into a space. So again, I think the big thing, I think building culture, I think a lot of those things come natural. I think it takes time with tradition. We have a bunch of traditions that have taken shape in our program that it happens so it happened in a very genuine and kind of authentic and organic manner, that one kid said another thing to a kid, and then it's something that continues to develop, and now are one of our biggest traditions and expectations for the room. So I think building culture, I think the bars, I think the plates do that, I think the room does that, I think the kids do that, but in order to build a culture, you got to have the community, so to speak. So building the community and encouraging the community and making sure that they feel like they're valued there, but also that they see value in what we're doing. And again, that's not blowing smoke. That's a goal of mine and a challenge of mine.
Yeah, I love that, Coach. I think that's a huge way to develop, whatever words you want to throw out there, culture, buy-in, whatever it is. But it starts with somebody that cares deeply about the people that they're serving. And you see that in any aspect, right? It could be coaching, teaching, whatever it is. And when you care about the people and the work that you're doing, I think a lot of good things are going to result from that. So I'm happy to hear that from you, man. That's really cool stuff. Now, with a lot of the stuff that you've described, I mean, it's a pretty cool setup what you got going. How kids want to buy into what you got going on. That doesn't mean that there's never a hurdle, right? So I'm sure you've had some pretty tough hurdles. Can you describe a hurdle that you've had to overcome, and maybe some of the ways that you overcame that specific challenge?
Yeah, and I think the more you work at a place, especially the more you work at a place and enjoy it, you know what I mean? Obviously, we all get. Thank God I haven't yet, and I hopefully never will. But I think everybody at one point or another gets kind of sucked into a job that they don't love. They don't know when to get out. They don't know how to get out. When you're in a position that you really enjoy and you really like, I think the challenges are what is the beauty of it. You know what I mean? Or the challenges become what was so become the memories that are the fondest, sort of. So even if I think one thing, especially for high school coaches and myself, maybe one kind of change of thought that I had that I thought initially, and it still was a hurdle, because once I started approaching it the right way, I think it was so much more, we benefited immensely, is interaction with parents. I think when I first got the job at North Broward, and I was coming from the collegiate level, I was thinking the one thing I'm worried about is dealing with parents and hearing from parents and concerns from parents. And then, I think until I started coaching track, so those first 2 years of working at North Broward, probably any word that I heard from parents was negative. And that's not saying that, hey, you said the wrong thing to my son or daughter. That's not necessarily what I mean, but, can you communicate the schedule more thoroughly? Coach said this, now you're saying this, so which one is it? When you kind of, if you step back, I mean, if you think about it, if you're a customer somewhere, more often than not, we're probably going to let that company or that business hear it if we're not pleased with something, or if we need clarification of something, if that makes sense. So you'll that's perfectly natural. That's a human expectation, that especially when you're talking about your most valued possession, your children, I ought to hear about it if I'm not doing a good job, or if I'm, if I'm not meeting your expectations as our school's customer. And we think of our families as more than that, but at the end of the day, that's what our families are. So we need to make sure that we treat our families as that. So when I flipped it was when I started coaching track, and I said, okay, well, But I'm hearing from parents is when they say, hey, my son missed the bus because he didn't feel well prepared, or he didn't feel like the schedule was communicated thoroughly enough. That was when I started to really try to over communicate, and not just over communicate for the sake of over communicating and like bore people and make things more dull, but to encourage and entice our parents to be a part of what we were doing. So I think the more proactive you are with trying to get parents engaged, the happier they'll be, the more excited they'll be, the more trusting they'll be in you. And that's like the number one thing. If a parent trusts you and at the dinner table, positive things are said about you as the strength and conditioning coach on campus, you've got that kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's it. If their sport coach is telling them that the strength and conditioning program is important, their parents are at home saying what a great opportunity that you have there, and a few other people, of course, that you can meet there, whether it be siblings or teachers. But I think like the number one thing that I tried to do, and a hurdle, just a kind of mental block that I had, a mental hurdle that I set out there, a barrier, was, again, trying to like avoid parents at all costs. And now it's the complete opposite. Like, how can we include our parents in this? Whether it's, just bringing snacks for the kids, whether it's planning an end of year party for the kids, whether it's in the summer, looking to get a little bit more from a nutrition standpoint for our kids. Parents are really fired up when you ask them to take part in it and play a role in it. And then again, you're not going to get a parent without the kids. So that's an important piece to kind of the sales and growth of our program, the recruitment toward our program, not off campus, on campus, our recruitment of our kids coming and being a part of our program. That I think has been a really, really big hurdle. And the other one, again, this is coming 100% from my own approach. I did not do a good job the first couple years of coaching our young ladies on campus. I flipped it and made sure that they know that they were 100% prioritized in everything that we're trying to do. And the program is like, it goes as our girls go. Like, they are the strength of our program. And I didn't make that known early on. And I think I just kind of did what I always knew how to do. Like, put the biggest, most intense group first, and then kind of transition throughout the day and be really tired towards the end of the day and wonder why our, last group wasn't showing up, which happened to be a girls group. So I completely flipped that, made sure that the girls are always first, meaning literally and figuratively. They will always be the first group that goes in the room, no matter what it is. And I'm going to probably run 5 minutes extra just so that the guys can stay out there and wait and the girls can see how much they're prioritized. And again, not only has our girls' numbers it's so much bigger than doubled, but our boys has as well for a variety of reasons, which has been something that's been really, really cool to see. So those two things, once I started including parents and really flipping just the entire way that I thought of who we ought to be, because like the football guys, I love them to death. Like they're the easiest group to train. They're the kids that are most like me, especially when I was growing up. They're the kids that I can probably relate to the easiest, and that's just being completely transparent and candid. That's going to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't need to work harder at developing relationships with those kids. That's not to say I don't need to build relationships on a deeper level, but building a relationship at face level, before getting deeper, even with our ladies and with some of the other kids that previously, other sports that maybe I didn't grow up playing and I'm not really like them, so to speak. I'm not really like them, meaning from a personal, like, not. I'm just clarifying my words. Not I don't like them. I'm not like them. Hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying.
No, I get what you're saying with all this stuff. There's a few things that stick out to me. First of all, I loved your mindset as it came in regard to how you look at hurdles, how you look at challenges, and say, these are opportunities to get better. And like so many times we talk about Carol Dweck's growth mindset, right? It's just something that surfaces within education all the time, and for people that are leading programs to be able to realize that problems are actually opportunities that is a huge perspective shift. And that's something that if we can live it out, man, I hope our student athletes can see the same
For
thing.
sure.
So that sticks out to me big time. And the other thing that sticks out to me is the communication with parents, because that's truly your story right there is kind of my story at Mount Vernon. Is I want to communicate with parents better, but I'm afraid that I can't educate them in a way for them to know exactly what I'm asking of our student athletes. Because if I educated them well, I think they'd believe exactly what we're doing. And I think, like, I'm being very serious with this. I think we have awesome support from our families, from our parents, but I don't know
Sure.
if I've done a good job of educating them and letting them know everything and why we do it, like the same that I do with our student athletes. So my question for you is, first of all, how do you communicate with the parents? What's that look like? Is that meetings, social media, emails, newsletters? What is that? And then also, what are you doing to educate them to know, this Tony Holler dude, you're riding his bus pretty hard. You see max velocity is a big deal. Training's a big deal. Why this, coach? What would your responses be, or not truly what would your responses be, but how do you educate them? Maybe the source or the way that you do that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first the how. There's so many levels of communication. I think if I met personally with probably like 20 kids and their parents before the summer started, of kids that like I identified as like kids that really wanted to be there, like track kids. This is speaking more so from a track coach perspective. There were a couple others, like I can speak candidly, I won't mention names, but like baseball players that I knew like I really wanted to get them in the room because they were going to be a leader to others, like young kids that I knew were going to develop into something spectacular and would benefit from our training, and our weight room and program would benefit from them being a part of it. Like there's a few instances that I think an email isn't going to reach that, just like a text message, you can't read what a person, a facial expression, like if you get parents in a room and like show how genuine you are and how passionate you are, I think that'll go a long way. So I think, but you can't do that with everyone, you know what I mean? That's not going to happen. So I think identifying a few parents or kids that maybe aren't bought in yet and you really want to be a part of it, maybe a personal one-on-one conversation and meeting will be a good thing, or it'll always be a good thing, but like will be extremely beneficial. Otherwise, I have like a weekly sort of like newsletter type of email that I send out. And I try not to make it like so routine like a newsletter so that parents know that there's a lot of time that goes into it, I think so. Emails are important. And you also have to remember, like ask any one of your kids if they saw your email and they're going to say absolutely not. They're going to say that they haven't looked through their email since the last day of school. They don't even know where their iPad is. That's just high school kids. You asked me if I checked my email in high school. I don't even know if I had an email account. And that was when email was more prominent than social media was. You know what I mean? So if you want to reach the kids, it's going to have to be through social media. What I found in social media is very, 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 it's probably it might be the number one most important tool that we can use as a program. If I want to connect with parents, still Twitter is the way to go. Our kids aren't as active on Twitter. Once they reach, we have a personal branding class on campus that is outstanding, and they'll kind of learn the ways of Twitter. And once they learn the ways, they're pretty good with staying on top of being in that space. But still, there's the other means. There's Instagram. We actually use Snapchat as a means of promoting, of sharing and communicating schedules and things like that. Now, the how, I think there's certain ways, and obviously this goes, it goes to like people skills of like who your parents are, who the kids are, what's going to benefit them most. Because more often than not, probably the share of our parents are going to benefit from the level of explanation that I give our kids. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. This is why we do it. This is a demonstration of it. Let's go. You know what I mean? Like that. More often than not, if you can put it into, just like the old saying goes, if you can coach a 12-year-old boy that has no interest in listening to you, and have them be engaged and learn what you're trying to express, you could teach anybody that. So if you have the ability to share with, and I've learned this especially in working with our middle school kids, that'll be kind of the age that I explained right there with the 12-year-old. But if you can explain it to the kids, you can explain it to the parents, and more often than not, that same level of explanation is going to be what they need to hear anyway. You know what I mean? Obviously, they're not going to be there training with you, and you might have to share a video of demonstration, but we share, and I think you had mentioned that you had seen some of our postings and some of the things that we do on social media. I share as much as I can on social media. I think it's the number one thing that we can do. The parents love it. They want to see it. They ask for more of it. And they see kind of the exercises that we're doing. And whether they ask or not, I want them to know why we're doing it. So, again, I think explaining it in much the same way as how you explain it to the kids, but also you have some of those parents that either are a little bit more experienced and trained and educated in some of the things that we're working on with the kids, and some of them maybe even that think they are and aren't necessarily, but that's okay. They have their own ideas of what training looks like. Sometimes giving them more scientific explanation isn't the end of the world. Maybe they skip over it and say, okay, this guy's just throwing big words out at me. Sometimes maybe that's what they want to see. Maybe it's, okay, well, this is clearly thought out. You know, if you even just show thought and you even just show like some sort of strategy and approach to what you're doing, I think parents are going to be like, wow, this is okay, good enough for me. You know what I'm saying? So Yep. Even if it is, I don't know if I'll get feedback on our emails from our parents. I don't know if our kids read a single email that I send out. I don't know if all of our parents see what I'm sending out. If they don't, it's okay. I know that it's benefited us because of some of the other feedback that I've gotten. So, and then lastly, like some of the things we fight against, you know what I mean? Like parents will see some professional football player performing an exercise with bad technique, or, you know, a professional soccer player doing some balancing act or something like that. And they say, maybe this, you know, is this something that we're going to do, or is this something that my kid's going to do? The reason why they like that is because there's some like name that is strong, and there's some face that is like, wow, that must be good because such and such said it. Find a way to use that to your benefit. You know what I mean? Even if I can find even if most of our good, readings, our own personal readings and personal growth and continued education, maybe aren't going to come from the Washington Post or something. I'm just throwing something out. If you include an article from the Washington Post, immediately people are going to see Washington Post. Okay, this must be something that's valuable. Whether that's truthful or not, like that's up to somebody else to decide, not me. But if we can find kind of a main, almost, I don't want to say a pop culture, but something that the parents can relate to and kind of see, well, oh, this makes sense because this was something that was published, or this was something that is on YouTube, as silly as that sounds. Like you can find some people that, and you can find some things that are worth sharing and valuable to the growth of your program, that parents immediately, again, using something that has previously been something we fought against and using it to our benefit, by taking advantage of that, so to speak. So there's a variety of ways. I think that depends on our own personal flair and our own personal touch. How you might connect and communicate with someone will probably be different from how I will be different from how your listeners will. So it's just up to the person to be themselves and share as much as possible. Don't spread yourself too thin, but keep the parents in the loop and keep them in the know.
That's sweet. All right, Coach, what is something that you're excited about learning yourself and improving on this next year as a coach?
I think I've kind of caught the track fire. I want to see some more time in this method of training that we've kind of shifted to, that I think is going to be really cool to see, not just again from our track program standpoint, but also how it continues to help all of our students develop. I think that'll be, and I know that's not answering the question as far as new, but it is kind of new in that there's more years kind of piled on to to add data and see what we've done and see what we've accomplished. I think probably from an education standpoint, it falls in the same line. I think, I want to learn more about what some of the, like, there's track is an international sport, and strength and conditioning, of course, is an international field, but I think we heavily rely on strength and conditioning coaches from the States for good reasons. There's, in my opinion, some of the best in the world are right on our soil, but same goes for track. But I think the international, I think track from a standpoint of the research that's being pumped out, the kind of your time is your time, and 100 meters is 100 meters, or 200 meters is 200 meters. I think kind of that international flair to it adds a breadth of information and a wide range of information that is still untapped in my own personal growth. So I think to continue to learn some things of, like, Tony Holler has made it so simple for us to understand and conceptualize what we want to do out on the track, meaning our program at North Broward Prep, among other coaches. Like, that's not the only system that has influenced us, but he's made it so simple. It's like, okay, well, how did he get there? You know what I mean? Or why does it make sense? I mean, it's the same thing of, like, why do we have to learn about, why does a strength coach have to learn about this atoms and, finding a deeper understanding, I think, will go a long way in just contributing to our training and contributing to our thoughts. So I think just kind of expanding on some of the same things that have been new to us over the last couple of years will be a big piece. And mainly that's my main way of saying, like, we're not there yet. We're still growing as a program. I'm still growing as a coach, and I'm still looking at ways of how this can really benefit us and benefit our kids. Middle school training too. Sorry, I'm sorry. This was a better one. This is probably a better one. Like, working in with our middle schoolers now, I've got to do a better job of coaching our middle schoolers, and that's being completely truthful with you. I'm working on it, and I want to reach out to some coaches that do a really good job. And do a better job of coaching them and inspiring them. I think it's been something like I've found success in it, inspiring and exciting, and I found success in motor pattern and learning. To meet in the middle, I think, is not where I've been yet. So I want to pull some coaches that have done a great job of making it enjoyable, making it exciting, but also having a kind of not an end of the road, but a next step approach towards what they're doing, and kind of transitioning our middle schoolers into our high school program. Sorry to cut you off, but that is really the big thing that I want to get better at in the next year.
No worries. I like both of those, and I think both of those hold a lot of value because, I mean, when you're implementing a new system, you can't know, like, within the first year exactly if it's good or not. Like, yeah, you have a good idea. I'm not saying that, but when you see a system run for a little bit longer than that, it really helps you to figure out, is this something that's going to be beneficial, day in and day out, year to year, whatever it looks like. So I like that. And then obviously, middle schoolers are the future of your program. So if you get to start out right, man, that's 6 years of training that you get with people. And I think there's a ton of value in starting at that age and being able to carry that through, because now, when people are normally hitting, varsity level at juniors, maybe they're hitting it a little bit more like a sophomore year. Maybe you see some of those things because, they have the physical development, or at least they've been exposed to it in the way that they need to, that they can develop the way they need to. So I like both of those, Coach.
Cool. Appreciate that, man.
So we finish up with some finisher questions, and it's 5 quick questions, and I throw them out there, you answer them fairly quickly, and then at the end you'll have an opportunity to just share with the listeners how you'd like to connect with them. If people have questions, how they can reach out to you. You ready to roll?
Sounds good, man. I'll try my best.
All right, sounds good. What's your favorite book?
I don't know if I could answer a favorite book, because it would have to go. I like doing my research outside of the strength and conditioning field. I am a South Florida kid through and through. Like, this is my home. This is the place that I love. more so than any other place. I really like reading about the history of South Florida, especially the Florida Everglades. I think has been something like my kids and I connect over it, and they kind of poke fun at me because I'm such a nerd about it. But I think it's so cool. I think just seeing kind of how South Florida has developed, and you could turn your head right or left and see kind of, well, that makes sense how this used to be a swamp. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds like something that no one else would be probably excited about. But growing up with it, growing up in it, that's been something I've been passionate about. But right now I'm reading Range by David Epstein. And I guess that'll be the plug that I can make, is the book that I'm reading now that I think has been something that's it's been good so far. I'm excited to finish it, and excited to get all the way through it. But yeah, I like reading books that are across, like, run the gamut. I like books that are, of course, business minded. I like books that are philosophy minded. I think reading anything that's going to help us connect with young kids, motor learning, motor skill development, and skill acquisition, are really important from a standpoint of coaching. But from just sit back and enjoy a read, like it's Florida history. And I know that sounds odd.
No, I like it, man. That's awesome. Well-rounded. That's the thing.
No, I don't know. I try to be.
Sometime I'm going to head down there and then check out the Everglades and have you be like a tour guide or something. That'll be
great.
Hey,
man, I'll do my best.
All right.
I'll try to keep you safe. That's the best I can do.
We're actually going to be heading down to Orlando in a couple weeks here. So I know that's cool. a little bit of ways from you, but it's still, it's getting closer to South Florida.
Yeah.
So
no, that's close. That's close. And you're gonna ask me probably a coach that I suggest, and I'm gonna tell you who to reach out to down up there. So
perfect.
Let me know. Maybe we can connect, because we've got some time in the afternoons and stuff in the summer. So maybe I can take a Friday afternoon trip up there or something. Just let me know.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so what's your favorite quote, Coach?
Favorite quote. I don't know if there's one that, kind of pulls at my heartstrings, but I think something that's made a big change in my own coaching experience and my own personal philosophy and maturity. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was speaking with Fred Eves, and he suggested to me and to young coaches basically as a whole to be countercultural. That's just a 2 or 3 word, depending on if you use a hyphen there or not. But speaking to especially young coaches, and I don't think he was coming from a place of saying like the world is screwed or our generation is terrible. That's not what he was saying. But culture is shaped in a way, and the status quo is forming in a way that is not conducive to personal growth, development, maturity, positive relationships, loving relationships. So in being countercultural, not only is it kind of saying, okay, I'm gonna maybe put someone else first in a culture of self-promotion, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying. But coming from a place that is like, it's okay to be against kind of what everybody else is doing. It's okay if I see, fellow mid to late 20s age coaches seeking gratification through some means, not to seek it in that way, so to speak. And I think another thing that kind of came with that is like always giving our coaches that have put their skin in the game the respect that they're due. I think it's a big thing too with coaches that are just so experienced and been in the game a while. Like we're not better than them. We're not smarter than them. I can say I'll probably never be. But certainly hold them to a regard. And I know that's certainly not what Fred was getting at, was to kind of put experienced coaches on a pedestal, so to speak. But like, that's really what I took from it, is like, even if we don't necessarily agree with the coach that's been in the game a long time, or even if we don't necessarily agree with our boss, I'm not saying just go with what they say, but understanding that it's probably coming from a different place and perspective of what we see right now. which is, potentially 5 years of coaching, which is not a lot. So be countercultural, this is a quote.
Yeah, I really like that, man. If you think about it, there's so much truth to it, because what's normal, what is average, is not what we want to be in the most part, right? Like for most strength coaches, for most student athletes, what they want to be is they want to be above average. They want to be elite. They want to work like that, And so it's really easy once you start to say be countercultural. If culture is one way, that's the norm. We want to be above the norm. So I think that is an awesome way to be able to see that. And I love that, like it's a hard path, but man, it's the path that's worth it. Right. So
absolutely.
I love that. All right. Favorite hobby outside of training? And I guess maybe it's like hanging out in the Everglades or something. What is it?
It is, man. That's exactly what it is. If you could tell me I have an hour to go do whatever the heck I want, I'm going to take my kayak out and I'm going to put it right there in the Everglades, and I'm going to paddle as far as I can and see as many things as I can and come back in time to use that hour, whatever it was. That's what I like to do. And it's not even, I wouldn't necessarily say it's even like, certainly kayaking and paddling and being out there is an outdoorsman and sportsman type of activity. But I'm not necessarily interested. Like it's not to go out there and go fishing. It's not necessarily to go out there and go hunting. Like that's not necessarily, not that I'm opposed to either of those. Like those are fun activities that I like to do. But that's not necessarily what I'm going out there for, man. It's just like to see things that are like, you just go 10 miles west, not even, and you see something so different from what you see 10 miles east, is something that's really, really cool. If I lived in, I'll plug Arizona again. I don't know why. But if I lived out in Arizona, I would probably want to be in the desert and in the mountains and see what's unique to their area. But again, that's probably a big thing is just going out to the glades and hanging out a bit. Would be I think that's probably my biggest hobby outside of training.
That's probably the coolest hobby I've heard on the show. So that tops it all.
Man. I think you're just saying that because you're talking to me.
Well, I mean, there's been some cool ones, but for real, like how many people have the Everglades in their backyard and they can go do that?
Not many, and that's why I appreciate it. And many people you look at it, and that's kind of I'm going to try not to get on a historical lecture here, but that's what people used to think about South Florida is you see, and it's like, oh, it's a swamp. Like we're not going there. What's the purpose? Like there's nothing to it. It's just really hot, really sticky, mosquitoes everywhere, gators everywhere. As Waylon Jennings says, if the skeeters don't get them, then the gators will. That's what people think of it, and it's like, oh, there's nothing to it. But when you're in it, and you get to really experience and see what's going on out there, it's a very very peaceful in a unique way, tranquil in a unique way. I do prefer it in the winter when it is bearable to be out there for more than 5 minutes. I will say that. And our winters are like 70 degrees, so I don't mean it's freezing cold. But I mean, seriously, most people probably think, and they're like, what the heck, that is nothing. It's just a swamp. But it takes on its own being, and it's a really unique space, and it's a way to get away. And maybe that is kind of why I like it so much, is because people probably think, and have always thought, it's unbearable, it's unlivable, just leave it be. Maybe that's the reason why I like it so much, but I sure do.
That's sweet, Coach. All right. How about if you got 15 minutes to train yourself, what are you doing?
Oh, man. I'm going to do a total body tier, a lower body tier, and an upper body tier, probably. And some variety of what I've been toying with lately, and I know I'm not going to get off on this tangent because I know these are supposed to be quick questions, but we have our unique way of trying to teach some of the Olympic lifts and some of their patterns and progressions, but we're not performing them in their entirety and finality with the catch necessarily, and that's for a variety of reasons. I told you the diversity of kids that we might have in the room at one time. But I have been toying with ways of and we're still using like some various forms. Like we've been using some jerk progressions, even some like snatch progressions, in various ways that have been kind of unique to our setting and what I feel like has been an appropriate stimulus, but also a learning progression for our kids. So I would probably go with something in our total body tier that would finish overhead, whether it be some sort of snatch derivative, some sort of push press or jerk derivative. Is probably where I would start, and then I would go. Actually, we're unique with our tiers, as I said. It's a unique. So typically our total body tier is going to be light, dynamic, and then actually our second tier is probably our is going to be our more intensified movement. It's going to be our more intense movement. So I would go heavy back squat, and then let's say I don't know, a dumbbell incline or something cool like that. It's probably I just finish it off with that and a pull, and then go ahead and be done with it.
That's I think you hit it all right there. I think maybe there's Joe Ken was on to something. I don't know.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, sure was and still is. I got to hear him speak last week.
Yeah,
He's
man.
Still coming up with ideas that are enlightening from my standpoint, ideas that maybe aren't new and I just didn't catch on to early on. But also some ideas that are new that are going to, change the course of many coaches' mindset and thought process moving forward.
Right. No doubt. That's an awesome opportunity, man. What a great conference there. So, can you give me a small school coach who's killing it and deserves a shout out?
Yeah, Micah Kurtz was who I said I knew you were going to ask this question. So Micah Kurtz is at Windermere Prep. Not only is it a plug of one of my best friends and just great guy, Micah is also, it's a plug of professional, and we are a corporate owned school, and there are multiple schools that are owned by this international corporation. Windermere Prep happens to be one of them. So I get to see Micah work on a daily basis, just about, and not saying necessarily in person because he's in Orlando, but I get to see what he does on a daily basis through social media and just hearing people tell me, why can't you be more like Micah on a daily basis on campus? He does a great job. He's awesome. I think he might, interestingly enough, I'm going to mention someone with the same first name, but Micah, I know many people probably know Micah at one point or another have at least seen his name. Another Micah is right down the road from us. Micah Stuckey is the guy's name. He's at a not a small high school. It's actually a large public school. But he's at a school that it's a South Florida public school. I don't know if their teams won any state championships. It means nothing to me from a standpoint of how good a coach I know that he is. So he's he's maybe a person that people haven't heard of, that I think people should know, because what he does in a public school and kind of creating a position is very much what he did there. And now where they're at now and the range of kids that he's got coming into the weight room and what he's doing. And he's an Olympic lift driven coach that I think does an outstanding job with his kids. He does an outstanding job with the kids that are going to compete in USAW, but he also does a great job in training the kids that are just playing sports on campus. He's awesome at what he does.
That's great, Coach. Thank you for those.
So the two Micahs, that sounds like a podcast in itself.
Yeah, Micahs. It does. They should start something that way.
Yeah.
So I've got one more question for you. That it's one more piece of information that you would like to leave with our listeners. So anything up to you. Something that you want to leave with our listeners, and also if you want to let them know the best way to reach out to you. So one piece for our listeners that you want to leave them with, and then also the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, that's tough. I think the one piece, let's support each other, regardless of level, regardless of thought process, regardless of that person did something training wise that I don't do, so I don't like it, so I don't like that person. I think we ought to take on a different approach to how we do that and how we provide feedback to coaches and criticism to coaches in our field, how we communicate with coaches in our field. Because there's there's some things that go back and forth on social media that I just don't think are necessary. You know what I mean? And the more there's no such thing as bad press for coaches that are maybe doing something that aren't the right way, if that makes sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
yep.
every time we run something's name, and I'm not saying someone because I like to believe everybody's in it for the right reasons. But anytime somebody performs a movement that or puts a person in a vulnerable position and posts it to social media, the more we run that, the more that person's post gets brought up. And again, I think more often than not, there's words that are used, there's slander that's used, there's attacks that are, and obviously I'm not saying threats, but just like personal things being said that I just don't think are necessary. I don't think it's the place for it. I think if we're not comfortable enough to send a coach a direct message and say, hey, why do you do that? Then I don't know why we need to retweet and say this person's an idiot. You know what I'm saying? Like I think I don't know that there's a time and place for that in our profession. I realize, like, I get it. Like, we do have to do a better job of proving our own value and proving our profession's value and showing the right way to do things. But I don't think the right way to do things is to negatively promote someone that's doing things different than the way we do it. You know what I'm saying? So I think there were a few instances over the past few years that, unfortunately, some kids either had heart conditions or some coaches ran them way too much. And obviously we know that that's not the right approach, and we know that that's not the right way to train kids. But in a couple of those instances, I knew the coach that was in the center of it. And I know that the last thing that they're going to try to do is put a kid in a position that they're in danger. I just think there's a way that we can approach this thing, and I don't know what it is. Otherwise, I would provide a solution rather than a problem, which is what I'm doing. But I think to connect, I think to continue to enhance communication, I think to continue challenging each other and being willing to criticize each other and take on criticism in a way that's, you know, the old biblical way, so to speak, of, you know, approaching somebody head on and talking to them man to man or woman to woman or man to woman. And then, you know, maybe there's a way that we approach it in a different way moving forward if it's a trend that we're seeing. But I don't think to run a person's name through the mud is the way to do it. You know, I think in certain times we almost root for somebody to do the wrong thing so that we can say, hey, I don't do that, you know. Which again, I just don't think is going to get our profession anywhere. So I don't mean to, you know, get on my soapbox. That's the last thing I want to do. I'm not here to criticize other coaches for doing that. I just think if we challenge each other and find a way to approach situations like that, I think we'll get so much further. Like we're not politicians. We're not Pharisees. Like that's not our spot. That's not our position to say someone else is less valuable than we are. Like, let's just all support each other. Let's just help each other out. The more we promote what each other are doing, the more support we're going to feel, the more support. Like you think my kids don't see when strength coaches from colleges, from other high schools promote what we're doing? Graciously, gratefully, and thankfully they do that. Kids are going to see that. You know what I mean? And the same goes both ways. Like, I think Coach Mac Kiefer said that social media is the ultimate street cred, and it kind of is. And with today's kids, you know, the more retweets you have on something, it might be very arbitrary or not unimportant to us. It might be something that is completely meaningless to us. Hopefully, it's not what inspires and motivates our social media usage. But to the kids, that is everything. You see it. A kid comes in day after you get 85 retweets on a post, like they're going to recognize that, especially if they're mentioned in it. You know what I'm saying? So Anyway, positive social media usage, like be positive. Let's continue to provide feedback for each other and not be worrisome or being, be cautious, but don't be fearful in criticizing, I think. But I think the criticizing and the criticism can come one-on-one and can happen in a direct manner. If that's a conversation that we want to have. And hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it doesn't feel like I'm challenging anyone in particular. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's just kind of a trend that I've seen over the last few years that I'm sure has happened for a long time. We just didn't have social media for it to be so in the minute and so live, so to speak. So that's just a thing. And with that, in talking on social media, I think the easiest way to get in contact with me personally is probably Instagram. It's Coach_Garrish, Garrish. Twitter, my Twitter handle is slightly different. It's at John, JOHN_Garrish. And I think the person that stole my Twitter handle happens to be my father. So I don't know if anything's going to happen for that. You could send my dad a message and he'll probably relay it to me, but that too has the Coach_Garrish, and I'll let him keep that name because he's the real Coach Garrish anyway. So I'm just living and trying to be more like him.
I love it. That's awesome. Nice,
yes,
Coach.
Sir.
Thank you for making the Big Time where you're at. It means a lot to me that you come on the show, and I truly appreciate it.
Yes, sir. The Big Time is where I'm at. I don't need to make it. It's the simplest thing in the world to do, man, is when I have realized very quickly that the Big Time is right where I'm at North Broward Prep. It's not bigger anywhere else. It's not brighter anywhere else. It's not better anywhere else. It's right where I am, which I'm thankful to have the opportunity, and thankful for you for giving me the opportunity to come on and share what we do with our kids. It's not something that I take lightly.